I think we're ready to go, right? I believe so. Yeah, we got some more people joining. Is anybody else coming, Nancy? No, we're good. We're good. No, we're good. Oh, that's fine. I'll let him. Yeah. Yes, if you can ask Max, I believe Max was setting up the live stream. Okay, so I guess good evening, because I think this is everybody. I think this is everybody, and I think that we have a live stream that's going on. So people are waiting, I guess, online. Now that we got technology, it's easier for everybody to connect. So now we got more people watching us. You guys are not on camera, so you guys are okay. I'm on camera. I'm the one over here, but they'll hear. Well, they won't actually hear as much as they would like to. So I will repeat questions if you have any questions. Um, for those of you that know me, I'm Miguel. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Miguel, one of the advisors here. I'll say I'm one of the older advisors, not just in age, but I've been with the group for about 15 years. So it's been a while. And I started working with Mauro Guerra back in 2008. A rough time for the market, a rough time for the economy, a rough time for everybody, right? Yep. And once again, we're going through rough times, right? For the economy and your pockets and money and decision making and everything, right? And so today we wanted to talk about a little bit about inflation and interest rates. I know that's been a subject, a big subject over the last year. So we're going to talk about that in a second. I always like to give a quick update on what's going on with the stock market before we start, because I know most of you are worried about the stock market. So the good thing about the stock market is that it, you know, goes up, goes down, but it goes up more times than down. That's the truth, right? Um, historically, there has been way more growth than losses in the stock market over time. Now, this year, the first quarter of the year was a positive quarter. Okay, so we experienced a recovery on the market. I think whoever has money invested right now probably saw a portion recover in the market, but we're still underwater if we are comparing the market to the peak. And the peak happened back in December of 2021. So starting 2022, that's when the market started going down. We are still, compared to that peak, about a 10%, 11% under that peak. Okay. So anybody that saw their account grow from 2020 to 2021, the end of 2021, and they saw it come down last year, you're still not back where it was at the end of 2021. Okay. But we've seen some recovery. We've seen inflation coming down a little. Okay. And we expect it to continue to come down a little. And we know that the Federal Reserve is kind of making decisions in order to get that taken care of, right? So we'll see how those decisions impact your financials and how they impact your pockets and how they impact everything, right? So let's start talking a little bit about how they calculate inflation. What do they take into consideration for the calculation of inflation? And a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people think it's a made up number, that these reports that come every month is something that the government wants us to understand or wants us to know, but they don't really explain what it is. So I try to, find the easiest way to put it, the easiest way to break it down for you, what they use is something called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is the average change over time on prices, and they use about 80 different items of goods and services that we use, right? Maybe some of those goods and some of those services apply to you, maybe they don't, right? But we live in a country of millions of people. So, you know, we can't just think of ourselves and think that the government is out to get us. They actually have to average out services and goods for everybody. But they take into consideration these areas, right? And as you guys can see, one of the biggest areas, or the biggest area in this pie, is the housing. Housing accounts for about 44% of that CPI, okay? So inflation has, you know, strengthened over the last year because the housing market started booming, right? Prices skyrocketed, rents skyrocketed over the last year. And that 44% of that pie just went up drastically. So for everybody's pockets, whoever is an owner, whoever is paying a mortgage, whoever is renting, it's tough. It's tough out there right now, okay? We got foods and beverages accounts for about 14, almost 15% of the pie. And then transportation, it's the other bigger portion of the pie, okay? So the other thing that went up in price last year drastically was transportation, for two reasons mainly, right? We had a shortage of cars, number one, because there was a lot of delay on production of cars. Whoever was buying a car last year, I feel for you, because there was no cars anywhere and prices were super high, okay? I had to purchase my car last year, and I decided to purchase the lease that I had because it was the easiest, fastest transaction. There was no inventory. So the lack of inventory created that a skyrocketing in the prices. Now, the second portion of it was the price of gas, right? Oil went up because somebody decided to start a war on the other side of the world, right? And so oil prices went up drastically last year, which impacts that big portion of our pie, right? Everything else is medical care is about an 8% on that pie. Then we got like recreation and educational and communication, and then other goods and services, which is like a 2.7. But I thought it was a good picture for you to see where the government looks into and how they find this CPI, how they find this data, and they don't just go and make out numbers. They actually go and do the research on the major cities. So this is not just like the Miami area. This is like the major cities in the country, so that they could put all these numbers together. Now, the CPI hit about a 9.1 last year in June, which was the highest inflation rate that we had. Okay, since then it's been coming down. Since then, the Federal Reserve has continued to increase interest rates to shorten the availability of cash and make us, or force us, to stop consuming, to stop spending. Okay, and we're gonna go into like how the consuming, how the spending affects or creates inflation, right? When we talk about inflation, there are three types of inflation, or there are three forms in which we can have a high inflation. Okay, the first one is the monetary inflation, or the money supply. The money supply, if the money supply increases in a country or in a community, and all of a sudden everybody has money, everybody else can sell goods for a higher price and nobody will complain. Okay, and what happened to us is that during 2020 and 2021, the government made a huge influx of money into the economy, right? Not only the stimulus checks that you guys received, but also a lot of loans for small businesses. And those loans turn into remodeling, those loans turn into more employees, those loans turn into more salaries, and that's more money coming into the economical activity, right? And that means that now people have money to afford things that they couldn't afford before, right? We also increased the savings in the country in 2020. During pandemic, we spent very little. Most people spent very little, stayed home, safeguarded themselves from this COVID thing that was happening. And so their savings increased over 2020. So by 2022, we're seeing all of these money in the hands of people, and people are spending and spending with no consideration of prices. So yes, we all have complained, over the last year and a half about how everything is much more costly than 2 years ago, but we're still buying, right? We complain about going to the restaurant and paying $30 or $40 for steak, but we're still going out, right? And so that kept happening last year. So when there's a lot of money coming into the system and we have enough money to spend, that's what we do. We spend it, regardless of how much it costs, right? And we want to get it, and we want to get it now. So that's one way to cause inflation, because everything starts going up in prices and people keep paying for it. The second way is consumer price inflation. And this has to do with consumer price inflation has to do with regulating the prices in the economy, which is what the Federal Reserve wants to do, okay? When we all agreed that something will cost more and we will be willing to pay for more, it just all of a sudden costs more, right? The housing market, we saw it skyrocket, and everybody just kept buying and buying, and we agreed on that price. But also prices that increase because of the shortage of oil and the shortage of gas, and causing the goods to go up in price, and we having to take that hit, caused that inflation. So one is money supply, because there's a lot of money to spend. The other one is not regulating the prices. And the Federal Reserve fell at regulating prices at the right time. And they didn't do that, not because they didn't want to, but because they had already established an amount of money that they were going to put into the economy, and they had to let go of that money before they started to increase interest rates to actually regulate prices. And that didn't happen until March of 2022. Okay, and we're going to see a little bit about that. There's another way of inflation, which has to do with those interest rates. Interest rates were very, very low back in 2020. Okay, and we're going to look at that. And when interest rates are very low, people are able to acquire more loans, acquire more credit, and manipulate the system to get just more goods overall, which causes prices to go up. Okay, so the crazy thing about inflation is that these three types of inflation, or these three routes in which we arrive to inflation, have never been together. They only happen once around the 80s, and we're going to look at some graphs and we're going to see how it repeated itself, but it's very rare. We usually see one of those three things causing inflation, and it's easy to contain. In this case, we had all the combination of all three, right? We had a lot of money, we didn't control the prices, and interest rates were so low that there was more availability for us to manipulate money. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys a little bit of how inflation has behaved over the last 100 years. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because we think that inflation is a bad thing, right? Everyone or clients usually ask me, why is inflation so critical? And do we need to have inflation? Is it necessary, right? And I always explain to people that inflation is an economical characteristic that we need in the system, because inflation makes an economy grow, right? Inflation means that the cup of coffee that Starbucks sells will increase by next year. and therefore the planter of coffee beans will get a little bit more money next year, and the transporter will make a little bit more money, and so everyone, in the supply chain will make a little bit of more money. The problem comes when that inflation increases from a 3%, which is what we're used to a 7%, like we closed last year. That's a double from that 3 that we're used to. It's about 100% increase, and we had it about a 9%, very close to the double digits that we saw in the 80s. So that was a little scary last year. Thankfully, they were able to bring it down. Usually when there is inflation, when there has been inflation or high periods of inflation, they are followed by something called deflation. And yes, there is such a thing as deflation. We're going to experience that over the probably next year or so. Okay, we're going to see prices start going down. That's called deflation. Nobody talks about that because nobody gets money out of that. The news, when they're saying, hey, deflation is happening, you don't watch the news. When inflation is happening, you watch the news. So they try to sell you whatever they can sell you. But the idea here is for you to see that, inflation has been, when we think about how bad it has been over the last 2 years, it hasn't been as bad as in the past. Okay. Back in the 1913, 1914, when we went to war, right? Inflation was almost at a 20% rate, or over a 20% rate during war. Because obviously those type of events cause everything to cost more, right? And so after that, there was a deflation period in the 20s, kind of like a recovery from all that war and that spending that the country did, right? But then we had another section of inflation around the 40s when we went to World War II, right? And that was also over the 15s, almost the 20% inflation rate, right? And then it got contained during the 60s, 70s. At the late 70s is when we started experiencing what we are kind of like similar to what we are experiencing right now, okay? And when we get to the early 80s, and I don't know if you guys recall that period, we had a huge inflation back then. And the Federal Reserve at that point decided to increase interest rates drastically, okay? For those of you that were here in the 80s, and maybe you were purchasing properties, mortgage rates were around 18%, 16, 18%. Okay, I don't know if you guys recall that. I know that Mauro arrived here to the US in 1982. And I know that the first car that he purchased, he was paying around a 17% interest rate on his first car. So yeah, inflation was there. Interest rates were so high because they needed to contain inflation. Okay? And so when we see like a 7% inflation, 6% inflation, yeah, we haven't been used to seeing inflation that high. So it worries us. But it's not the worst thing in the world. Okay? And the good thing is that whatever the Federal Reserve has done has brought inflation down over the last 6 to 8 months. Because since June, we've seen that CPI number keep coming down. Okay? Not as fast as we would like to, but the truth is we didn't get to that 9% inflation overnight. It took about over a year to get there. So it's going to take us a little longer to bring it down. Now, I know that a lot of you are concerned about interest rates increasing. Some people are concerned because they don't know how is that going to affect the economy. Some people are concerned because of what happened with SVB Bank, the Silicon Valley Bank deal, last month, right? And how those interest rates may affect your investments or how they may affect the market, right? So I wanted to run down through the U.S. interest rate history because us as humans tend to have a short-term memory. And we only remember like this year and last year's situation. We forget about like the previous years fairly quickly, okay? So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what's happened with the interest rates. Currently, the Federal Reserve has interest rates at a 5%. That's where we currently are. Now, the Federal Reserve interest rate is not the mortgage rate. It's the Federal Reserve rate. Based on that Federal Reserve rate is how banks project or do the projection for loans and how they do mortgage loans, personal loans, and so on and so forth, right? The reason why the Federal Reserve increases that is so that less people borrow money from banks and less people have money outside to be able to manipulate and keep prices up, right? It makes it tougher for business, especially for small business to run, because the small business, most of the small business are running on credits, right? They get credits from the bank, they start their business, it's a startup company, and they will struggle if the interest rates go so high that they can't afford the loan and pay back, okay? So it doesn't slow down the economy. So it's basically kind of like a handbrake to the economy. That's what the Federal Reserve has been doing, okay? Now, we are currently at a 5%. I want you to pay attention to this because it's really intense and crazy. Last year in March, as you see here, last year in March, we were at a 0.25%. Basically nothing, right? No, 2022. This is in 2022. That was a year ago. So in 1 year, the Federal Reserve took us from 0.25 to 5% on interest rates. Okay? Now, before that, in 2020, the Federal Reserve took the interest rates down to 0.25. And we all know the reason why. A COVID situation happened. Nobody knew what was going to happen. So they said, let's lower interest rates to the minimum. Okay? Now, hear me out. This is not the first time that they did this. This is not the first time that we've seen a 0.25 rate, okay, and have rates on the floor. We saw this several times in the past, okay? But we only remember what we can remember, so we go as far as 2020. Now, what happened? What happened before 2020? Let's dig a little bit further and find out. In 2019, the rates went from 2.25 to 1.5. So they were coming down already. So it's not like the pandemic threw us down to 0.25 because the Federal Reserve had already been lowering interest rates before the pandemic, right? And that had to do with the fact that in 2018, Donald Trump complained to the Federal Reserve because they had been increasing interest rates too quickly. And that was not allowing the economy to grow as much as we expected it. Okay? And so in 2018, if you see here, in 2018, the rates were at 1.5 in March, and they ended the year at 2.5. Most of you that had CDs or bank accounts or any instruments that were fixed, by 2018, you guys were feeling, oh, wow, the CDs are starting to pay at 2%, at 1.5%. It's getting good again, right? But that was in 2018. And then Donald Trump had this conversation with the Federal Reserve, told them, hey, you guys are squeezing the economy too much by increasing interest rates too fast. And so we need to lower interest rates. So they started doing that in 2019, right before the pandemic. It just happened that the pandemic accelerated the process and just dropped the rates to 0.25, okay? 2017, we had increases from 0.75 to 150. And 2016, we only had one increase from 0.5 to 0.75. If we go back, 2015 was the first increase that we saw in the interest rates since 2008. Now, everybody remembers the 2008, right? Nobody forgets about that one. That one we all remember. People lost a ton of houses. People wanted to become rich, buying and selling houses and flipping houses, and it was crazy, right? It kind of feels and smells and looks like what's happening now, but it's different. And I can tell you that it's different, okay? So back in 2008, the interest rates were in January at 3.5%, and they ended up at 0.25, all because of the crisis, right? There was something that needed to be done, and so they lowered the interest rates. And they kept it at 0.25 until 2015. They only started increasing in 2015 by 0.25, 2016 by 0.25, and then 2017 3 times. And then 2018, Trump said, hey, lower it. It's too high. And we only got to the 2.5. So what I'm trying to tell you is this. Since 2008 until last year, that's about 14 years, we had not experienced interest rates higher than 2.5%. So we got used to seeing interest rates very low and being able to loan money at a very low interest rate, being able to purchase houses at a very low interest rate, being able to get cars and acquire credit at a very low interest rate. And now when things are going up, we feel like it's not fair, but it's just part of the economical cycle, okay? Before 2008, we can just review a little bit. 2007, rates were at 4.75. That's when they started bringing them down. Before that, 2006, 2005, 2004, I didn't go further down, but you can see that in 2004, rates were at 1.25. If we keep going back, 2003, rates were at 1%. Okay? So do you realize or you notice how cyclical this thing is? This is not something new. And when people are seeing the news and watching the news constantly, and the news are telling you that it's the end of the world, then you start to believe that it is the end of the world. Okay? The reason why I'm bringing this information up is so that you guys can understand that we've been there, we've been in this situation or worse situations in the past, and we will get out of it. It just takes a little bit of time. It's not from one day to another. Okay, the stock market biggest crash happened in 2008, and it took about 4 years for the stock market to recover, which was a crash that it was nowhere similar to the one that we had in 2022. Okay, it was nowhere similar to that. Now, I wanted to refresh that, and I wanted to compare it with the mortgage rates, because I know a lot of people usually when they think of interest rates, they start thinking about mortgage rates and housing affordability, okay? And if we look at mortgage rates since 1970, remember that I told you about the 80s and how mortgage rates were drastic in the 80s? You see this spike up here on rates? Just so you know, the ones that are far back, this is a 15% interest rate for a mortgage, okay? This was way higher. This was around the 80, 81. That's when, if you were buying a house, you were getting a house for an 18% mortgage or 16% mortgage or 17% mortgage, okay? Today, we got about an average of 6.28. That's average, and that's for this week, okay? Now, we've been used to seeing about a 3%, 3.5%, 4% over the last, what was it, 14 years? So when we see a 6.28% or 7%, we think is outrageous. We think it's really bad, okay? Now, as you see in the graph, interest rates have started coming down for mortgages. They stabilized in the 90s, 2000s, right? And then they went down after the crash, the real estate crash in 2008. You see that here? They stayed down for that 14-year period, as I just told you. And then they just increased. But nowhere near back in the 80s. Yet, we still feel that it's like the end of the economical system. But it's not, okay? When you average out actually the mortgage rates fall on around a 6-7%, between a 6 and an 8% over time. That's where mortgage rates have always been. So For anybody that's buying a house now, if they feel that they're getting a 6% and they're, getting robbed with a 6% interest rate, that's not the case. You're able to refinance in the future if things change, which most likely they will at some point. Now, when is that point? If I would foresee the future, I wouldn't be here, but
The value is higher.
yes, the value will always be higher,
Then the point is,
right?
make a comparison with the
I know. Same thing. Here, the salaries that we had back in the 80s are nowhere compared to the ones that we have today. The cost of living is higher. I understand. Now, the cost of living, and this is something that I do tell all the clients, right? When we talk about inflation, when we talk about this happening, interest rates tightening the economy, and inflation hitting us hard, the first thing that you got to do is regulate your expenses. Pay attention to your budget. I know that this is not what you guys want to hear, because we all like our cappuccino and frappuccino and whatever at Starbucks, and we all like to have our glass of wine at the end of the week, and we all have to enjoy certain things of life. I agree with it. I love them too, by the way. But when inflation is that high, then you got to start making the decisions of what you're spending your money on, right? Especially under this current circumstances. So the first thing I always tell clients is watch out for your expenses. Make sure that you are handling your expenses the right way. And if you don't need to make an unnecessary expense, don't make it. Don't purchase anything that you don't really, really need to purchase right now. You want to know why? Things are cyclical. And I just told you, after high inflation, usually prices will come down. And then when those prices come down, you will regret that you purchased that sofa or that bed or something that was quite expensive, and you paid more for it. Now you got the one you wanted, and you get to enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with it, but just be conscious about it. Most of the time we complain about the things, but we just still keep doing it, right? It's kind of like, hey, this dog keeps biting me, but let me just pet him. I don't understand that behavior, but I wanted to illustrate that for you. So this in terms of the mortgage rates, one thing that we touched up last year and we're still seeing this year, and it's going to slow down this year, is the relationship between the interest rates and the bonds. When the Federal Reserve increases interest rates, the bonds go down. Okay. Now, I left this slide in the presentation for one reason. Not only you guys that are our clients have been listening to us, but there's people outside that listen to us and they want to know what to do with their portfolios. And there's people that have money in bonds that they kept the basic 60-40 combination that everyone sells, right? 60 bonds and 40 equities so that you can be safe. And what happens is that over the last year, this 60% that's supposed to be safe in bonds has lost about a 9%. And this equity portion has lost about a 12%. And this is supposed to be the risky side of it. So when most advisors set up a portfolio for anybody that's in retirement and they use that 60-40 formula, that's kind of what the breakdown is. And yes, the 60% for bonds is meant to protect your portfolio, keep your portfolio afloat. But when interest rates are going up as high as they just went over the last year, these bonds lose value. When interest rates go up, prices of bonds lose value. And we saw that in action with the Silicon Valley Bank. Okay? The Silicon Valley Bank had money invested in treasury bonds. Now, those treasuries are for 30 years, usually. When all of the depositors, all of the account holders in the bank decide to come to the bank and get their cash out, the bank usually puts money into three big areas, right? They have to keep some cash in hand to be able to give money back to the people that requested whenever they requested. But they don't keep all the money in a safe and ready for you to come and pick it up, right? They usually make more money with that money. How do they make more money with that money? Well, once they borrow money, they lend you money, right? They lend you money through mortgages, personal loans, credit cards, car credits, and so on and so forth. And the other money, they go and invest it. And they usually have to invest it in something that's considered safe, like treasury bonds, right? And that's what they did. But what happens when you increase interest rates, and just so you understand this graph here, what happens when you increase interest rates is, let's say that in 2020, there was a bond that was paying a 2% rate, okay? And I was purchasing that bond, and if I'm purchasing a bond, is usually a par is $1,000. So if I'm purchasing that bond paying me 2% in 2020, but you want to come and purchase a bond in 2023 because you understand that interest rates went up, and now you could probably get a better interest rate. And in fact, you go to the government and the government says, hey, we're not paying 2, we're going to pay 2.5, right? Which one you rather get? The one right now. But you know me, and I'm your friend, and I come and tell you, hey, why don't you buy this one from me? Because I truly don't want it anymore. What would you tell me? Would you pay me the same par value, $1,000, when you could get one today that pays 2.5? Or would you request for me to lower the price so that you can get it? So bonds lose value when interest rates go up because of this reason. And when the Silicon Valley Bank had everybody liquidating their accounts, they had to start selling all of these bonds that they acquired back in 2020 and 2021. And we're not talking about thousands of dollars, right? We're talking about billions of dollars. We had about $42 billion being withdrawn from Silicon Valley Bank on that Friday that it collapsed. Okay, just so you guys understand the magnitude of what was happening, right? There is mismanagement, and there's a lot of other things and so on and so forth that come into have to be taken into account, but that's basically what happened. So the reason why I'm explaining this is so that you understand what happens when you have a portfolio that you're not paying attention to and you just let it sit on a mix that they have recommended forever. Now, does it mean that this doesn't work? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that it will take longer for that portion of that portfolio to recover. Because I just showed you, we just went over, 2004 until now, 20 years of interest rates. And you saw how that went up, and down again. But that wasn't 1 year or 2 years. It took a while. So yeah, interest rates will go back up. And that's why when you buy treasury bonds are for the long haul. They usually are 30 years. Okay? So the other day somebody was asking me, so you're telling me that bonds are not safe, they're risky. So I said, well, it depends. If you're willing to stick with the bond for 30 years, the government is going to guarantee that you get your money back. So if you stick with the bond for 30 years, it's safe. But if you want to sell it before time, you are at the risk of selling it at a lower price. Okay? And that's what's been happening. So last year, we recommended most of our clients to get bonds of their portfolio, okay? And instead place their money in cash or place their money elsewhere or use equities or look for different sectors in the market that were performing, like energy, right? Like oil companies and all these companies that were actually thriving last year. And so that's what we've been doing, and we've been managing our portfolio this past year more actively. Okay, so we're making adjustments on the portfolio every 2 weeks. We're making readjustments when things happen. When this whole bank crisis started happening, we took money out of the financial sector. We actually purchased some short-term bonds because the short-term bonds or notes are 3 months, and those are paying a higher interest rate, and those are more stable. When there's a high inflation, usually that's one of the shelters for money. Okay, so we place a little bit of money in there. But there are some alternatives aside from that. And I think you've received some information from us, from our team actually, letting you know what's going on, right? So when interest rates go up, not everything is bad, because I'm making it seem like it's so bad, but it's not, right? When interests go up, all these fixed instruments that pay a fixed rate become handy. So if you go to the banks right now, the banks will offer you CDs for 3.5, 3.7, 4%, 4.2%, whatever, okay? We actually work through Fidelity Investments, and Fidelity has a money market that currently, as of today, I took that picture of today, it's 4.49%, okay? So I don't know if you are paying attention to the news, but over the last 2-3 weeks, there has been a lot of shifting of money from the big banks and the regional banks into more custodians or brokerage firms like Fidelity or Vanguard. And the reason is not just the safety of their money, right? The safety of their investment and breaking money into different buckets, but also interest rates on money markets are higher. And you have no commitment on those money markets. You can put money in and take money out whenever you feel like. So for all of our clients, we've been recommending, if you have money in cash, if you have money sitting in the bank that's not doing anything, this is a good alternative. And you could keep it there for as long as you want to. You don't have to hold it there for a year. You don't have to hold it for 18 months. You know, you're not subject to any penalties. You could deposit the money 1 month, 2 months, and then take it out if you want to. But earn some interest. Make it work for you, right? Make it productive. So that's at 4.49. Most likely it will continue to go up because the Federal Reserve hasn't stopped increasing interest rates. They're just not doing it at the same pace as they did it last year. But they will probably increase interest rates once more again, or maybe twice again this year, before they actually come to a stop. And that will depend on jobs reports and inflation reports and so on and so forth, okay? I wish I had the crystal ball to tell you when they're gonna stop. We're just, attentive looking at what's happening so that we can make adjustments for the portfolio. Now, we've had some clients that have asked us about I-bonds, okay? Savings I-bonds. I-bonds are different than the regular treasury bonds or EE savings bonds. I-bonds are inflation-related bonds. They have an inflation component and an fixed interest component on the bond. And they get recalculated every 6 months. Last year, this interest rate on the I-bonds was 9.62%, just so you guys have an idea, okay? When they recalculated, because inflation had gone down, then this was the new rate. Now, this is the rate for all the bonds that are issued between November 1st of 2022 and April 30 of 2023. I wanted to bring it up because it's the last month for you to get any I-bonds if you want to. Now, this interest rate is only guaranteed for 6 months, because in 6 months, they're gonna recalculate it and change it, depending on where inflation is and where the interest rates are, okay? Now, the one thing with this is we don't manage these bonds. This is directly with the government. So you go to treasurydirect.com and buy your bonds. The maximum you can buy is $10,000 per person. Yeah, I know. Everyone was thinking, let me put $100,000. It's going to be a 6.89%. That's some good $6,000 I'm going to make. But it's $10,000 per person. Okay?
What's about Fidelity?
Fidelity is just a 4.49 annual interest rate. There's no minimum. No, you can put as much money as you want to in that money market and take it out whenever you feel like. Yeah. So that's just money that instead of being in a savings account at the bank, can be producing a little bit. And then there are some index products that we work with, right? And some of you understand what the index products are because you are into retirement years, right? Some of you are already retired, some of you are getting to retire, and some of you are preparing for retirement. And we've spoken, if you've met with one of our advisors, you've spoken to someone about this type of accounts. And those are accounts that offer you an upside potential with no downside. Meaning if the market does well, then you make some money. If the market goes down, then you protect your money. But here's the catch. Because interest rates have gone up, when that happens, insurance companies also increase the potential for those accounts. Okay? So contracts that are being issued now, some of those have a maximum gain of about a 10% compared to what it was 2 or 3 years ago, okay, which were way lower. And some of those have a 7.5%, and they're giving bonuses and they're giving different perks, you know, or additions to the account so that you can make it work. They work with the S&P 500, so we just illustrated what 100,000 will do over time in those two vehicles with no downside. Now, the reason why I tell you this is because there are alternatives to investments, right? So if you have money that's sitting around doing nothing, we don't like to hear that. You know, we only like to see our clients grow and grow their wealth. That's where we want to be, right? And preserve your principal, preserve your money. So there are some alternatives out there that we can do. Handling the market, dealing with the market, it is an alternative as well. Our portfolio, compared to the market year to date, the market was up for the first quarter about 7%. Our portfolio was up about 9%. So we're trying to make the most when it goes up, and we're trying to safeguard when it goes down. It does depend on when you went into that portfolio as well. So I always tell people, if you want to know a little bit more details, reach out to, you know, our group. We have about 30 to 35 people at your service. Okay, I'm not the only advisor. Right now we have 5 advisors, and soon it's going to be 7 advisors because we got another 2 people that are seeing clients now, or are going to start to see clients. And that's a good thing though. I know that most of you maybe resonate with one of the advisors here. Maybe it's myself, maybe it's Mauro, maybe it's Sebastian or Jimmy or Tyler, whoever it is that you feel comfortable with. But you want to have more than one person working with you, okay? Because at some point, somebody's going to be out, and you want somebody to be able to service you or service your account or be on top of things, right? Right now, we got Tyler that's out for paternity leave. He had a baby 3 weeks ago. So, you know, I'm chipping in for the clients that he needs to see. Jimmy is taking some time as well to serve his clients for Tyler, and so on and so forth. And you want to have a team that's qualified for that, right? That's kind of what I wanted to go about today. If you are a client and you want to meet with one of us, you should have one of these yellow cards so that you could request that meeting. Okay, we can do it through Zoom, we can do it in person. You guys choose. If you are not a client and you want to get to know us better, you could also set up a meeting with us. And you know, I always tell people, we started doing this. We started doing this last year. We had to stop because of the whole pandemic situation, but we always have been big in education for our clients. We've had this room. It used to be a little bit bigger, but we've always been big about keeping our clients informed of what's going on, what's new out there, what's happening with the market, and so on and so forth. We want to keep that communication channel back and forth. We've grown in size in the team so that we can service you better. Okay, we've grown in the technology side as well so that we can help ourselves help you better. Okay, and everyone has adjusted to the changes, including Mauro. So yeah, take advantage of what you got here. Meet with an advisor, review the portfolio. That's just a constant thing that you should be doing, right? Even if you go into your account every day and you see it in green and you see it better than 2 months ago, still meet with an advisor. There are changes that happen in your life that you want to make adjustments about. I'm seeing him right now, and I met with one of our kids, one of the kids of our clients this morning. He's about 25 years old. Last time we met was about 2-3 years ago. I don't remember exactly when he came on board with us. And today I found out that he had saved up another $20,000, and he had more money than when we started, and his account has grown over time. And it was good for him to see the positive behavior of his account. So he decided, hey, this is something that I need to pay more attention to. I need to put more money in here. I need to invest more money and do something else, right? And he's only 25. So the reason why I say that is because a lot of you guys constantly make changes or adjustments in your life, right? You sell a property, you change houses, you inherited money, or something happened. And that needs to come into the plan and needs to get readjusted so that you can understand. And it's not just necessarily for the investment purpose, but for taxation purposes as well. So we send information this year that we started doing taxes this year. We have a branch that's taking care of the taxes. We have two team members that are spearheading the tax plans along with the accountant. Okay, and that's the accountant that's been doing the taxes for the office for the last at least 10 years. Okay, so this guy knows what he's doing. And there's a difference between the tax preparation and the tax planning. There are two different things. Tax preparation is just take your W-2 forms and your forms to somebody that's going to put them into a system, get them done, and just give you something back and charge you $200 or $100 or $500, whatever it is, right? And there's tax planning. Tax planning doesn't happen, and tax planning doesn't happen from January to April. When you start doing tax planning in January to April to get your taxes done for the previous year, you're too late. Tax planning needs to happen from January to December so that when you get to the next January to April, that tax planning can actually take form and take place into the tax preparation. So I'm letting you guys know how the system works, because usually everybody wants to get it done quickly, get it done fast, and jump over all that process of the planning, and it doesn't work that way. But since your life changes, those taxable events will come in, and they need to be understood. I met with the daughter of a client recently, maybe a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago. She took the last little bit of money that was left in her retirement account. Okay, and this is sad. This is not a good story. This is a sad story. But this is the daughter of a client, of Mauro's client, and he was a client for, I don't know, probably like 20 years. Okay. When he became a client of Mauro, he never let Mauro know that he had family, or his beneficiary was a foundation and so on and so forth. When he started losing his health, Mauro brought him to the office once, started talking to him more on a personal level, and found out that he had a daughter. So he had him bring the daughter. Then we find out other stuff about the family and the whole thing. But the interesting part here is that our suggestion to him and his daughter was to go and establish an estate plan. Okay, and we put them in contact with two estate planning attorneys, and they went to the attorneys, and they never did anything because they thought they were going to spend too much money. Okay, and too much money was about $5,000. Just so you guys kind of understand. They decided not to do anything, and then when he passed away, she ended up losing in taxes I would say around 180 to 250. Okay, just in taxes. And I'm not saying that with the state plan she would have avoided that, but she would not have lost $180,000 or $250,000 in taxes. She would have probably paid the $5,000 and had to pay in taxes maybe $20,000 to $25,000. So it's a huge change, right? Game changer for someone that it's going to rely on that money in the future. Obviously, there are behaviors, and she just depleted the accounts and used up the money. But it comes to my mind because when we do give the advice, we always try to steer the conversation in the most effective way for you guys, right? And that's what every single advisor here does. Not just on the investment planning and the investment management, which is what most people think that we do, and that's the only thing that we do, but in every area, right? Taxes, investment, income planning, legacy, whatever that you guys need, whatever service that you guys request. And some people decide to do follow the advice, some people don't, but we are always going to do the best work for you. And that's intentional. So meet with your advisor and just keep tabs on your portfolio, keep tabs on your plan, understand what's going on. Like I said, control your expenses. Inflation is high, things are expensive. There's a little correlation that it's for you to understand. How many of you have heard that the housing market is slowing down and prices are coming down? Okay, how many have actually seen the housing market come down in South Florida? Nobody, right? So you heard about it, but you haven't seen it. Yes, you haven't seen it happen. So this is the crazy thing. When we look at housing prices have started to decrease on the West Coast. And it's kind of like it's shifting from the West Coast towards this side. Now, when we look at San Francisco, the Bay Area, and Seattle, and all of California, pretty much, housing has gone down between 11 to 13% in price. Okay. Once we come to the midsection, it turns to a 6 or 7%. Once it comes to the east side, it's about a 3%. The lowest that we've seen, it's Tampa and Jacksonville. They lost about a 3% in value. Miami, our beautiful Miami, it's a steady staying there. Okay, but yeah, the prices are gonna come down. Maybe not as much as we expect here in Miami, but overall in the nation. And the rents will also downturn because people cannot afford. It's not going to be a matter of 2 weeks or 3 months. It's going to take a little longer, but that will happen. So manage your expenses in the meantime, okay? And when the time is right, then go do the big purchase that you need to do. But be careful about what you're doing right now. Be efficient on what you're doing right now, okay? And that's our advice. Tell other people about us, because that's the only way that we can get our voice out there. We do the live stream, and we allow people to be able to see this. Our clients are able to see this now live, because we want to keep this information going. But if you got colleagues or friends or family members that need to talk to one of us, let them know, okay? And set up an appointment for them, or get an appointment yourself and come with them. And we're here for you guys to serve you, okay? I don't know if you had any questions or anybody had any questions for tonight. Otherwise, I will let you go early today, I guess, and get to my wife early too.
Yeah.
You guys have a great night then.
Thank you, Miguel. Yes.
Me.